join me today, not in my garage and not looking at any of my cars. In fact, my neighbour has very kindly invited me to come and have a look at the MG, which he's just purchased, which is a barn find, well, garage find, and is currently in the garage behind me. It's been sat here for 15 years. It's an MG TD from 1953, and we're going to go and have a look at it. Here is the car. It's a 1953 MG TD. It was last on the road in 2006 when it was driven by my neighbour, and it hasn't moved since. The owner has only recently agreed to sell it to him. So it is as it was left more than 15 years ago. And if we look under the bonnet, you can see the little four-cylinder engine, and from the car numbers, it's one of the last 600 produced. If we close the bonnet and look over the other side, we'll be able to see the twin SU carburetors with the MG manifold and the SU electronic fuel pump. The interior is in excellent condition. It was reupholstered sometime before it came off the road in proper leather, and there are very few items missing. It's in remarkably good condition considering how long it's sat for. Very pretty little instruments. With the 3-spoke banjo steering wheel, there's the fly-off handbrake and the central gear shift. All that's been done with the car so far is the windscreen has been removed and polished, and some of the dirt brushed off, as well as oil put into the cylinders to lubricate it when it turns over. What we're going to be doing to restore the car is firstly getting it running. We're going to remove the fuel tank, have it professionally cleaned, as well as checking everything works as it should before we even start trying to start it up. So I'd say it's about time we got round to doing that. So we're starting by removing the tonneau cover for the first time since the car went off the road. Looking at the fuel tank, you can see it's one of these external arrangements, as is common to shortly post-war and pre-war cars. And of course, not having moved in such a long time, the petrol in it is old and smells sort of like methylated spirits. So it's clearly a good idea to have it cleaned out as the first port of call before starting it. Well, I've donned overalls to get started with the removal of the tank, and I can already see that it should come off without too much hassle. I plan to remove the wheel, these little bracers, and possibly the bumper too, depending on if we can get to the little bolts holding it on down here. So let's get on with that. I've now just taken out the screws which were holding the rear flap of the roof on because these bolts here were just spinning because on the other side there is its nut. So I'm going to put one spanner on here and the other one on here and try and get them off. So, these are all finger tight anyway. Well, that's an easy job. So I've now got the 4 bolts out of here. They came out with a bit of difficulty. They're not the originals, and somebody has put them in and they look a bit odd. So we're not going to be putting those back. We'll find some more original ones. And I've also removed the trim pieces which go on the sides here. They came off very easily, and now I'm going to try and work on removing the bottom nuts and possibly the bumper, depending on how much needs to come off to get the tank out. So we were just trying to get these little chrome coach bolts out of the bumper, but it makes it rather more difficult when the hole, which should be square to align with the square on the coach bolt, has been rounded out. So we had to grip it with just the friction of our fingers. So the bumper has now come off. It was held on to the car by these two bolts, but you have to take the bolts out of the chrome side itself first, because otherwise you can't get enough gap on these to get them completely out of the hole in the car. We're now going to try and remove these little ones here in the hope that this rear panel will then just slide out, and probably these ones as well. And then hopefully we should be able to get to the remains of this now wobbly bracing, which will hold in the tank. Let's give it a go then. Some washers have dropped off, but the rear valance is now loose. So we're now going to disconnect the fuel line here. This is the wire for the rear light and the number plate light, and that's the drain plug that you'd use to drain the petrol out the tank, but we're going to have it professionally cleaned anyway, so that doesn't matter. So I'm going to take that off now. Hopefully I've got the right spanner. Well, we'd hoped that there wasn't enough petrol in the tank to make it come out, but unfortunately it looks like there's more than we expected. So luckily we've got an impromptu funnel and a receptacle to put the old petrol in, so now hopefully it should be all right to take off the line. Oops. Ah, yeah, that's better. Got rid of the blockage. Well, the petrol has now just about finished oozing out of the tank. We managed to fill up the 5-litre can, and then we filled up some coffee cups, and then we tried to fill up this hard hat, but it had a hole in the bottom, so it went on the floor instead. But, you know, at least it's out of the tank, so that's an improvement. And we should hopefully now be able to just lift the tank out. We're now going to try moving the loosened, something just fell off then, the loosened bracing for the tank, and then hopefully it will swing back without snagging the wires for the rear light, and we'll be able to lift the tank out. We're going to do this very carefully and slowly. So. Don't want that to get hurt. There's one wire down there for the sender for the fuel gauge. I forgot to take off the little wire for the sender on the fuel tank, for the gauge, so I'll try and do that now. That one's too big. I found the right spanner and it should just come off now. Avoid dropping these. I'll put them down in a safe place, like that. Ah, now this is being held on by the tank. Ah, there we are. And now I'll put the nut and washer back on. Phew, the tank is finally free. One tank like that. So that's the fuel tank removed. It's filthy, but hopefully when it gets properly cleaned and we can put it back, it'll look an awful lot better. And here's the car. It's not quite so filthy, but it still doesn't look very good. Phew. I think it's time for a cup of tea. So there you have it. Although we didn't get quite as much done as we'd hoped to today, we still managed to drain the tank and completely remove it from the car. Hopefully next time we'll be able to spend some time looking at the engine, possibly see what's wrong with the carburetors and try and get them to work before starting the engine. Anyway, that's about it from me, so thank you very much for watching and ta-ta for now.